One for the treble, two for the bass. Come on, David D, let's rock this place.
WUSB Stony Brook, who we got on the line?
This is Tony Arfi from Power Play Studios.
What's going on, man? What's going on?
Well, trying to get our documentary done on the studio. We have quite a list of artists that we're trying to get to come onto the movie. We've already done the trailer and looking to take the next step. But this COVID-19 thing has really put a damper on it. We can't get people to do the interviews.
Yeah, it's rough right now. That's why we're doing a phone interview now instead of in person. But, man, for all the people out there who do not know the legendary status of this man right here, unbelievable, man. Like this is the center right here, WUSB right here, Trim Mix Party. We're the center of the underground hip-hop movement right now and boom bap. You know what I'm saying? And for all the people who don't know, this guy right here was responsible for starting the most legendary studio in hip-hop history, Power Play Studios. And for those people who don't know the history of Power Play, I want you to tell them a little bit how the studio got started first, man, before we get into anything, man. How did you even start the whole studio?
Well, it's a good story. I had a friend of mine who was, first of all, I was a rock and roll musician. I'm a drummer. I had a band and stuff, played all around the tri-state area, did some shows and things like that. And a friend of mine who I played with years ago down at Great Gildersleeves and Max's Kansas City and a few other, rock clubs in the city, called me up and told me that he opened up a studio in Long Island City, Queens. And I lived in Astoria, which was, about, 3 or 4 train stops down the road. So he invited me to come by and take a look. So I did, and he had just one rehearsal studio built, and the rest of the space, it was a huge loft, the rest of the space was barren. So I had dabbled with recording before on my own with some equipment, that I had and other people, friends of mine, and even with my band, I used to engineer and do the live sound and all that stuff. So I asked him, I said, well, what are you going to do with the rest of the space? And he told me he ran out of money. So I said, well, what if I, paid half the rent and whatever the utilities were, and I would build a recording studio in the front half of the space. So we agreed. And that's what happened. And I was working at the time at the World Trade Center. I was a telephone technician for ADT on Tower 1 on the 91st, 92nd, 31st, and 14th floors. And if I had been there the day those planes hit, I'd have been one of those people jumping off the roof.
Yeah,
so
that's crazy.
I wasn't there that day. Anyway, so I made money. I was in the union. I got loans. And I bought, 8-track equipment. I bought a Tascam 80-8 with the DBX, a Model 5 board, reverbs and microphones and all that stuff. And me and my friend, a couple of guys that we hired, helped build the whole studio, which was the original Power Play Studios. So I was taking ads out in the Village Voice every week saying 8-track studio, $25 an hour. So that was the cheapest price at the time. We weren't in Manhattan, so I knew I had to do something to attract people to Queens. But although we were right 3 blocks away from Ravenswood and Queensbridge, which I didn't know that the hip-hop movement was about to explode and was exploding in my backyard. Yeah. So anyway, I got some clients to come in. One of my first big clients was, believe it or not, Rick Rubin. He calls me up one night. I'm cleaning up. I had finished the session. I'm vacuuming the room, and the phone rings. It's about 11 o'clock, and I say hello. He goes hi, and he didn't say his name. And even if he did, I wouldn't know who Rick Rubin was back then. This is before he did anything in hip hop. So he says to me, "Listen, I have a 5-piece punk rock band. I want to come in and do a song." I said, "Okay." He goes, "Tonight." I said, "What?" He said, "Yeah." He goes, I'm coming in. And he goes, "I'm right over the bridge. I'm coming in to Long Island City, and, I want to do the session." So I said, "Well, if you're not here by 12, I'm leaving," because I was ready to pack up anyway. So about 5 minutes to 12, the bell rings. I run downstairs, and it's Rick Rubin with 4 other guys. They come upstairs, and he looks around the room, and he sees my vacuum cleaner out of shop vac. And I had been vacuuming, so I had left it in the middle of the studio. So he says to me, points to the vacuum. He goes, "Does that thing work?" I said, yeah, it works. I said, why? Is the place dirty? You want me to keep vacuuming? He said, no. He goes, I want to put a go ball around it and mic that thing with an SM57. I said, what? He says, yeah, man, I want noise on the record. I want that vacuum cleaner on its own track. I just looked at him and I said, well, you're paying, I'll do it. So we did. We did that. About 5, 6 o'clock in the morning rolls around. They finally finished recording. And it was a god-awful song. I mean, I had a headache. I couldn't take it anymore. But anyway, he comes in the room and says to me, let me hear the playback. So I play it back. And he goes, did you record with DBX? I said, yeah, I always record with DBX. He goes, oh, no. Take the DBX out. I said, hold on. If I recorded with DBX and now I take it out, it's going to be the noisiest freaking thing you ever heard.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's exactly what I want. So I said to him, all right, look, I'll do it, but don't you put my name on this record. All the money I spent on equipment is to make it quiet, not to make it noisy. And I don't want anybody to know I was associated with this menagerie that you're making me do. Push comes to shove, I did what he wanted. He mixed it, he put it out, and freaking record sold. Don't ask me how. About a month later, he calls me back. He goes, hey, you still got that vacuum cleaner? I said, yeah. He goes, I'm coming in. So he did another record with me. And then the third time I heard from him was long after the Beastie Boys and all that other stuff that he was doing. He was now into hip-hop. And he came here with Jazzy J, and we did It's Yours in my studio.
That's right. I'm good friends with Tila Rock, by the way. Shout out to Tila Rock. That's legendary right there, man. It's so funny this is full circle, man, because me and Tila Rock got real tight years ago, man. Over a decade I've been working with Tila Rock on stuff. So what was it like in the studio sessions with Tila Rock?
Well, first of all, by the time Rick got back to me with the hip-hop, I was no longer engineering. I had hired a whole staff. At the beginning, I was the only person there. So I didn't actually record that. I want to just make that clear. I was not the engineer on it. I forget who was, but it wasn't me. Anyway, I've done a lot of hip-hop. I've produced a lot of people. And, you know, as a drummer, I think the connection for hip-hop is huge. Because as a drummer, you study all these beats. Every beat you've ever heard on a hip-hop record has probably been done by a drummer somewhere. Not that he remembered ever playing it, but he probably played it in his lifetime sometime. So when you're, you know, and then we bought all the drum machines. I had the first Lynn drum. I had the DMX. I had the Roland 808. I mean, I had every drum machine there ever was. So, you know, I had to sit down and learn how to program the drums. Because I'm a drummer and I know what sounds good, but to make the machine do what you want it to do or make it sound real, that's a real challenge. You know, people don't realize how hard that really is. It's easier now, but back in the day, they didn't have the human feel. They didn't have touch sensitivity as nice as they have it now. So you really had to struggle and even overdub. Sometimes I overdubbed real live drums on top of the drum machine just to get certain effects that I couldn't get with the drum machine. So being a drummer, I think I had an advantage to that. So I did a lot of programming on sessions, and I did a lot of producing, which no one ever gets credit as an engineer or a studio owner or anybody producing a record that you didn't get hired as a producer. But inevitably, if you're in that room for 16 hours, you're producing that record. Because let me tell you something. The kids that came in, they did not know anything about electronics. They would come in with a scratch and a rap and tell us, I want a sample here, I want this drum beat there, I want this hit here. And the engineers had to figure all this stuff out, how to get it to where they could say, okay, it sounds like what I heard in my head. But they had no idea how to do it.
True indeed. Like back in the day, I used to record at Legend Studios over there, and same thing, man. We would come in with what we wanted, sample, drum piecing it all out. Then I went to school for recording engineering so I could learn it myself. You know what I'm saying? But in those early days, man, I remember getting those engineers to do what we wanted, man. It was like magic. Those engineers were magic. And shout out to,
none of them got credit. I'd say out of 100 engineers, one of them might have got a production credit. And meanwhile, if that engineer wasn't in that room to do what he did, those records never would have made it. I'm going to tell you another interesting story that happened early on in Power Play in the early days. So we had Herbie Azor who you know who Herbie is, right?
Yeah, Herbie Lovebug.
Yeah, Salt and Pepper, all those Dane and Dane, all
Kid
stuff.
and Play,
Anyway,
yeah.
Herbie comes to me because his friends told him about Power Play, and he wanted to be an intern. We actually hired him as an assistant, but really he was an intern when he first got there. I don't know if you know the name Patrick Adams.
Yes.
Okay, so Patrick was one of my main engineers, and I met Patrick through Marvin Schlechter at Prelude. Patrick had just gotten out of the hospital, and he had done so much cocaine that he poisoned his blood, and they had to transfuse all of his blood, and he spent about 8 months in the hospital.
Wow.
By the time he got out of the hospital, he was penniless, homeless, had nothing, nowhere to go, nothing. So Marvin, because he knew me through Spider D, we had done some other productions, tells Patrick and tells me, you two guys have to meet. So I went into the city to Marvin's office, and we sat down. I met Patrick. I said, listen, I got a vocal booth. I can put a pillow in there and some blankets. I said, you know, you can stay at the studio if you don't have a place to live. So that was probably one of the best decisions I ever made, because what Patrick would do, he'd sleep for maybe 2 or 3 hours. Then he would get up, fool around with the Lindrum, fool around with all the equipment, and I'd get there the next day and he'd have an album done, you know, of unbelievable productions. It's stuff that you have not even hip hop. We're talking R&B, you know, soul music, because he did all the Black Ivory. He wound up producing Shannon. We did so much stuff, so many different projects with Patrick. Anyway, so the big deal came for Salt and Pepper and a lot of other artists that they wanted, and Herbie, they wanted to use the James Brown drum beat. Okay? Yeah. So if you sampled the James Brown drum beat and then you tried to rap to it, it was too slow. So everybody was speeding it up. But the way they were speeding it up was like, you know, turning the revolutions of the record up. And you know what that does? It makes it sound like Mickey Mouse.
Yeah, Chipmunks.
You lose all the bass. It sounds like tin drums. So along comes this machine called the Poubleson Infernal 90, made in France, $20,000 sampler. Not only was it a sampler, but it was a time compression machine. It was a harmonizer. It was all these things. Nobody had one. I went to the in the city. They had the AES show, and I sat in the room with the people from Poubleson, and they knew who I was, because we have been doing a lot of records that were making it big in Europe, and they sampled this thing for me. They demoed it. I was floored. There was no machine that did anything, and it sampled for a longer time too. I think it was like 30 seconds or something, because most sampling, you're lucky if you get a hey out of a sample, which was the James Brown thing.
In those days, yeah.
Yeah, so I buy it, 20 grand. Take it to the studio. Open up the manual. It's in French. So I'm like, what am I going to do with this thing? It's in French. I don't read French. I'm lucky I could read English. So Patrick Adams says to me, I can read French. I said, what? He goes, yeah. He goes, I studied in school. He goes, I'm very fluent in French. I said, here's the book. Good night. I locked him in the studio, and I went home. So the next day we come back. He's got the James Brown drum beat that everybody wanted, sampled, running at a faster speed, did not change the pitch. That's when the studio started to blow up, because nobody knew how we did it, but everybody wanted it. So we started doing tons and tons of hip-hop records from that. The other thing that sparked us was that we did the first scratch record that was ever produced and probably put out was One for the Treble by Davey DMX.
Yep.
Once that record came out, the phone never stopped ringing. So there were certain things that caused the excitement, and when they found out all this stuff was being done at Power Play, there was no other place to go, because nobody else knew how to do what we did.
True indeed.
They didn't have the equipment.
Now, let's get back to Spider D real quick, because I know you did a lot of stuff with Spider D back in the day.
Spider was my main man. He was my right-hand man through all of this.
Right. And how did that start, man? Because I know you got the DJ Divine record back in the day. And how did that whole thing start? How did you meet Spider D?
Okay, so Davey DMX was good friends with Spider. I think they went to the same high school together in Hollis. And he was talking to Spider and says, "Hey, I found this studio in Queens. It's awesome. These people, they know what they're doing. He did that record there because Davey is a genius anyway. He could play any instrument, do anything. But he told Spider about it. So Spider came to me, and we hit it off right away. He's very mellow, very intelligent. We just spoke about music and electronics and all that stuff. He started bringing me projects. Because, like I said, he brought me Patrick Adams through Marvin Schlachter, and he brought me, there's so many people that he knew that I didn't know. So, because I was very, naive to the hip-hop movement at the time, I trusted Spider. If a guy came in with an idea, with a beat and a rap, I'd turn it on to Spider. I'd say, "Spider, do you think this is any good? Should I produce it? Should we take it on?" And, we would pick certain records that we did, and a lot of stuff came out on little, small labels, and we did a lot of compilations, and we did a big one on Next Plateau as well, Eddie O'Loughlin at the time. So, but Spider and I were very close. He worked for me in a lot of capacity. We taught him how to be an engineer. I taught him how to be a manager. He was already a producer and an artist. I didn't have to teach him that, so I just would use his talents on anything that seemed it would fit, and it always worked out. He always brought in the checks. He always brought in the clients. So he was instrumental in Power Play becoming the force that we were in hip hop, especially.
Yeah, so then that brings us to like Boogie Down Productions, Eric B. and Rakim. That was around that time, right, when all that stuff started coming into the studio, or how that happened?
Yep. Yeah, we had DJ Red Alert come in. So many people. I mean, the documentary is going to be really huge. Oh, Marley Marl was one of my biggest that came in. I used to help Marley out because he had a 4-track Tascam in his apartment. So when he did Roxanne Shante and all that stuff, I would bounce the stuff up for him to either 8-track or 24-track, and then he'd finish it and do the mix. Because Marley brought me LL Cool J, and he produced and mixed "Mama Says Knock You Out," which was LL's biggest record. Yeah, Molly was in with Mr. Magic, at BLS, and then we started working with Jose Animal Diaz and this other guy who was a DJ over at Hot 97 and Kiss and all these other. We were working with all the radio stations, just a lot of stuff.
All right, yeah, let's talk about some DJ Doc right now. How'd that whole situation go down?
Well, that again was through Spider. They were good friends. So Spider introduced me to him, and he was going to that school downtown, the Center for the Media Arts at the time. So he was working, not working, but, learning all that stuff. So I hired him because he was a DJ and he knew a lot about hip-hop and everything. So I hired him, and I believe he started doing sessions after a couple of trial runs with Patrick Adams and possibly Spider showing him the board. And then he started doing, sessions. I think he did the first big session that he did, I believe, was MC Light. He did an MC Light, and he also did a Queen Latifah. Those were the 2 records that happened before Boogie Down Productions that I remember.
Wow. All right. Yeah. So you guys were bringing in all the heavy hitters, man. That's crazy. One question I have though, I heard a story about an intern taking the tape from Eric B. What happened with that?
Yeah. Okay. So Eric and Rakim finished the second album, and they were mixing it, but they didn't have the final mix. It was like a demo mix. So they had it on cassette. Back then, we didn't have anything digital to record it on, so they recorded it on cassette, and they were going to go home and listen to it, and then they were going to let us, then they were going to mix it for sure. So the intern, who was very new to the studio, I really didn't know him that well. I didn't hire him anyway. The management hired him. And he was in the room, and when everybody left, he rewound the tape and made his own copy of that record, of the new record.
Damn.
Supposedly, he started playing it for people. There was a whole to-do about it. Even one of the radio stations heard about it. So I get a call from Bert Fidel, who's Eric's manager, and Eric telling me what's going on. I'm like, that I had no idea. I wasn't in the room, blah, blah, blah. So anyway, Eric shows up that night to start, the real mix. And this intern walks in, the same guy. He had no idea that they found out that he did this. As soon as he walked in the room, because Eric came with like 5 or 6 guys. He always came with a posse. They turned around, they looked at him, and I said to the kid, "You're going to get beat up." So the kid takes off, he runs down the stairs, and I run after him. And they're behind me, and don't ask me how I was faster than these 5 guys, but I guess adrenaline does a lot. I raced down the block, I stopped the kid, I said, "Give me the tape right now." I said, "Give it to me." So he gave me, I said, "Keep running."
Yeah.
So turned around, and Eric was like right there. They were still running towards me. And I gave him the tape. I said, "Here's the tape. The kid's gone. He's never coming back. I fired him." I said, "I'm very sorry that this happened. But truthfully, I saved that kid's life. I think they were going to kill him."
Yeah, they probably would have, man. That's crazy. All right, so I don't want to take up too much of your time, but let's talk about what happened to Power Play Studios. With all these artists and all these producers, how come Power Play is still not in power today?
Well, that's a long story. If you want to save this one for another time, I would suggest it, because this story is like a 5-year story that happened, and you need to hear the whole thing to understand what really happened.
All right, so we'll leave that for part 2, man. So you're definitely going to be on the show in the future. We'll do a part 2. I'd like to thank you for giving me your time tonight. This is dope, man. And I'm going to go and play some classic Power Play records. We're going to start with It's Yours, T. La Rock. Coming up right now, Trim Mix Party. Thank you once again, Tony, man, for calling in.